Hello there, and welcome to Electronic Sports Arena Challengers podcast with myself, your host, Scottie from Team M&M. So we are having our edition 3 today, which will be focusing on the competitive open map pool and the main man behind it. Now, speaking of the man responsible for making all of this possible and on a mission to make Trackmania Esports a better place, I am honoured and it is a pleasure to be joined by Erwin Weber. If you would care to take away an introduction as to who you are and what you do for ESAC.
Hello, I'm Erwin. I'm the founder of ESAC. I'm also producing this podcast while Scottie is hosting it. I've been in charge with developing and pretty much everything ESAC related so far.
As we said, exactly the man that makes this all possible, of course, came about with the ESAC, of which you will remember perhaps from the matchmaking service, of which was opened and unfortunately closed a bit of time ago. I believe 6 months ago we had to wave goodbye to ESAC, but however, we are back and we are hopefully back better than ever with new projects and new things to undertake. Now, first things first, of which we would like to then focus on, is the past for ESAC. Now, as I said, this is our third podcast. Previously, of course, we had a second one in regards to the preview of LAN events and an introductory one in regards to the general kind of esports outlay for Trackmania as of what it was at that time. Now, with ESAC moving into its third podcast, as we said, we would be focusing on the competitive map pool. But before we look forward, let's look back first of all. Now, Erwin, would you mind running us through, for those who weren't aware, exactly the kind of projects and what you were working on when you first brought ESAC into the Trackmania community?
So initially ESAC was my bachelor degree project, which consisted in a matchmaking system that was compatible with Trackmania Nations Forever. Basically 1v1 matchmaking. There are some maps, some ESL maps, you played them, and based on your results you gained rating points, and based on your rating points you were categorized into different ranking groups, bronze through gold, each with 3 subcategories. Later on, compatibility with Trackmania Stadium was added. Meanwhile, Trackmania Nations Forever servers were closed, and that's basically where it all started and gradually developed into multiple features like challenges and some kind of trying to organize leagues, but in the end it didn't work out that great of multiple reasons. Maybe the one which I focused on the most and trying to get the word out was about the maps and the map pools and how they work in the competitive aspect of Trackmania, but also financial reasons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair. I mean, as one of the people who did actually get involved in playing the ESAC, the matchmaking service of which it was on, it was a great kind of a great switch up to what I'm typically used to in playing Trackmania, and I can certainly vouch for it being a very interesting addition to what the competitive scene was at that time. We saw players great and inexperienced alike playing together and playing against each other, and generally everyone seemed to have a good time, and it was looked upon as a positive kind of addition overall in terms of what it added to the scene at that time. I think, kind of anyone who was involved in it or even aware of it could have spoke to, as I said, the positive side of that. But of course, as you said, unfortunately, reasons and circumstance as a result, ESAC had to take a little bit of a breather. Now, 6 months we are 6 months now we have since passed, and things have changed. And now we see a kind of refreshed ESAC. And as I said, this is kind of part where we will start looking forward into what are the new projects. Now, first of all, for those who were maybe not as in tune with ESCC going forward, as I understand a lot of the primary information that's been put out there through the likes of the WordPress documents, of course, which we will provide links to for any of those who would like some reading material and some interesting insights into what will be happening with ESEC. For those of which were more used to the matchmaking service, is that something you're going to be prioritising going forward? Or is it more the open map pool, which is going to be your primary focus, getting a structure in place for?
Well, the matchmaking will work at best with the open map pool. I mean, the matchmaking servers will always be the priority with the ESAC because that's what originally the ESAC was about and will still be. But yeah, we will see multiple other features. Right now, I can only say about tournaments. There will be single elimination tournaments with 16 players, and everything will be automated. So there's no need for admins and stuff like that for the tournaments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Of course, more as a kind of functionality, so to speak, to allow these sort of events to run a bit smoother. Is that the kind of goal you had in mind when you were looking into something like this?
It's pretty much automating the whole process of organizing tournaments and matches and everything like that. This is going to be a big priority for ESAC.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Now, with how we then came back into ESAC, because I understand you were mentioning, of course, the initial stages you were undertaking as part of your degree and things like that. Now, of course, we've had the 6 months break, of course, the reasons cited previously. Now, what was it that kind of inspired the comeback, and especially the interactions in regards to the open map pool? Was that still something you were wanting to undertake as part of a degree? As of course, me being a pleb without a degree, I'm completely oblivious to. Or was there some sort of other reason of which you have then brought to the table for getting the likes of the open map pool projects underway?
Well, the timing for ACC coming back is mostly because of financial reasons. I have right now the possibility of buying servers and keeping the website up. And in regards to the open map pool, initially, as you might have seen on Twitter and WordPress and stuff like that, I tried to encourage the discussion about having a global map pool in Trackmania, but it didn't really end up anywhere. So I found this alternative to make an open map pool, which is basically kind of a global map pool, but not enforced. So everyone is free to use it how they want. They can use one map, they can use all the maps. Pretty openly available to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were bringing in, when you, of course, formulated the idea of the open map pool and undertook it as a project, was this as a result of something you saw that the Trackmania scene was needing, as in that there was a space that was there to be filled, or was there anything else that kind of prompted the reasoning as to undertaking that yourself?
There were multiple complaints from the community with maps. This has been, for me at least, that now recently I've noticed this even further. We see even another movement with mixed maps, mixed styles, and can you ask the question again?
Yeah, I was just saying, what was it that kind of prompted you to actually undertake and bring forward the open map pool suggestion? Was it that you had kind of identified a niche within the community, as in, like, this is a spot where I should, this is a problem that needs to be solved, so to speak? Was that what kind of prompted you to undertake it? As I understand there, you were mentioning that community members had caused were mentioning problems that they had with the way things were working. Is that what kind of got you getting the idea in motion, so to speak?
Yes, this was one of the main reasons. The problem with the quality of the maps, the testing, because the maps are rotating so fast in multiple competitions, and the testing process is different for everyone. It's quite easy to have lower quality maps into the official map pools. And there's also other problems like schedule overriding, because I personally think Trackmania is growing as an esport, and its activity, it's pretty much gonna get higher. And if it gets it, we obviously want to have a better esports climate, a better competitive climate in Trackmania. And if it's going to grow, then we will reach some problems that will be pretty much not solvable unless we have some kind of solution like the open map pool.
Mm-hmm.
Because
as you were saying, sorry.
We will reach a point when schedule overwriting is going to be always there. It's always going to be a competition going on. It's always going to be some maps to train, and instead of giving the players actually to choose which competition should they prioritize, we should the map pool should be a solution for the players to actually make it possible for them to play in multiple competitions instead of actually prioritizing one over the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly as you said, it's a solution to a problem which we can see developing within even just the past few months, in terms of how kind of Trackmania has been having a lot more online tournaments, as we've seen, for example, through the most recent tournaments, TCS and ALM Cup, of which they were having I believe ALM Cup was going straight after TCS, and also there was the PTC, which is actually starting off today with its qualifications. They have kind of ALM and PTC have overlapped, and there's been discussions there about using familiar maps, as in, say for example, PTC would use ALM maps to then make sure that there wasn't as much training needed between the two tournaments, because even, for example, within my own experience in M&M, we've had to prioritize what we're going to play in case of ALM or PTC, as in what we're going to have to prioritize. And exactly as you said there, it's not a problem. It's a solvable problem, and it's only one that's going to get worse with Trackmania getting bigger, as we of course hope and are at least seeing the signs of with these other tournaments of which are coming about. Now, of course, we've established the kind of reasoning as to why the competitive open map pool is then needed. Now, for those who haven't actually taken the time to look through the document, and I mean, I understand the name of it as it being a competitive open map pool is indicating as to what exactly it is. But from the man who made it himself, would you mind, of course, for those who are maybe not so familiar, giving them a run through of exactly what your idea is for the map pool and how it's supposed to be implemented?
So it's divided in 4 quarters per year. So each quarter will have a different map pool, 2 different map pools actually, one for tech and one for dirt. And each map will have to come in 3 different versions, 3 different length versions, so it can be accessible to multiple organizers. First versions being, I think, 40 seconds and 50 seconds, then 50 seconds and 60 seconds, and then over 60 seconds until 70 seconds. That's basically the core format of this map pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see, of course, exactly as you're saying, they're suiting different length variants, as we've seen, for example, our tournaments like TMM having much shorter maps, whereas your other tournaments, say the ESL, are now TMS tracks, being a minute plus and things like that. Now, just a point there that was brought up in our Twitch chat as well. And as well, guys, just to point out, feel free to ask any questions regarding that. We will get to them as best we can. We'll address any points of which you guys have either to myself or Erwin. But so at the moment, I understand we're preparing for quarter 4, and the map submissions have been opened. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're open since 5 days.
Okay, so of course, for any aspiring mappers out there, get your maps in as soon as possible, so that we can, of course, have the best start to the quarter. Make sure that we're starting off on the right foot. But in terms of this as well, another point that was kind of brought up there, in terms of the two different map pools of which you were mentioning, one for tech and one for dirt. First of all, why was it kind of decided it would only be for tech and dirt? And secondly, do you plan to implement other environments into that into this kind of framework, so to speak?
For now, I think tech and dirt, when it comes to like the strictly competitive activity, those two are the most active ones. So that's why I've chosen. I also thought about adding full speed, but I don't have the contacts and the necessary people to ask questions or have help from testers and stuff like that. But I'm most probably starting with next quarter. There will be multiple styles. There may be even mixed styles. So tech, dirt, full speed, and mixed. That's probably how it's gonna look like. If everything goes well with this quarter.
Of course, yeah, it's kind of the daunting kind of start to it, so to speak. I can understand. Of course, again, reminder, quarter four will be from October to December. Of course, the map submissions are open to get that underway, and as I said, as exactly as we're saying, submit your maps so that we can have the best kind of start to this as possible. But as well, going forward, for any of you out there who do then have the contacts to be to enable the framework to be a lot more easily implemented, of course, certainly send them our way, give us their contact, and we'll see what can then be done to make this as best as can possibly have been. Now, in regards to this, with the map pools as well, I understand you're mentioning with maps having different length versions. Now, we've seen not as much a complaint, but more a kind of issue with some of the players who have been playing a lot of the maps recently, because of course most of our tournaments recently have been featuring, as was quoted, I believe recently, TTC style maps. And for those who are not familiar with TTC or what exactly I mean by that, so we're talking shorter maps, we're talking slightly easier maps, and maps that would lead your experienced player to be risking more and perhaps more susceptible to mistakes. Is there a specific difficulty level you're looking for in these map submissions, or is it specifically length, of which we will be limiting it down to?
I've actually wrote down in the requirement section of the map pool that it should be progressive. So the longer it gets, the harder it gets. I think this is going to be the most accessible way of it being available to everyone. It would be pretty risky to actually make a short map the hardest way, to actually require the mapper to make a hard short map. It's probably not going to be adopted by many tournaments. So that's why I thought maybe having a progressive difficulty as the length of the map increases, it's going to be the best way, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can certainly agree with that as well. It kind of sticks to what we're used to in terms of Trackmania. I mean, with what you were saying there about the difficulty of creating, a short, hard map, as we typically don't see tournaments which utilise that sort of thing anyway. Neither do we normally see very long, easy maps within the kind of events calendar that we have in Trackmania. So at least it allows that, of course, you'll have your 40 to 50 second easy to medium maps, which will typically suit, say your TM Open styles, say ALM Cup is a more fun cup, TMM, things like that, whereas your 60 to 70 seconds would maybe even suit something like, say, for example, your TMPL seasons, or, for example, playoffs of some harder tournaments. But something that I'm kind of curious of in terms of the goal with this. So what is the kind of end game goal with the competitive open map pool? How would you look at the project and think it had been a total success? What are your kind of measures of success when you enrolled this? As in, how will you see that it's gone well, do you think?
Being implemented in as many tournaments as possible, actually bringing the possibility of new initiatives, of new tournaments to start organizing really competitive tournaments or competitions or stuff like that. Because now, if you have access to this map pool, you don't need testers, you don't need to have to announce mapping and the mapping process and requirements and stuff like that. You already have everything available when it comes to maps, so it will be much more easier to organize. I hopefully many tournaments will consider this and adopt it. That's pretty much the end game. I think will probably be this becoming the global map pool, but I don't see it being likely.
Yeah, now in terms of you meaning you don't see it being likely, and I understand a lot of the people who might be in the chat aren't familiar with one of the main discussion forums that a lot of the kind of interested parties have in the Trackmania scene as the Trackmania esports collaboration, which a lot of discussion upon this sort of thing goes down. Now, you're saying, of course, you're not entirely sure if something like that would be likely. Now, of course, I have seen the very same conversations myself, but like I said, I understand other people haven't. What is it that you're seeing which makes you think that this might not be as easily received by the community, despite it being such a positive addition?
I think I was being with the opinion of that Trackmania has a blessing and a curse when it comes to diversity. I mean, it's probably the most diverse esport out there. So, being diverse as it is, each tournament organizer has its own vision of its own tournament. So this is the main reason why a global map will be really, really hard to get to.
Mm-hmm. So just in terms of the tournament organizers kind of having their own ideas, their own preferences and things like that. Because
Exactly,
I mean,
yes.
well, there is, I would say easily in terms of this idea, the positives far outweigh the negatives. Of course, I can understand in terms of the arguments of which these organisations do raise, as in terms of they don't have their own testing team so that they can kind of handpick the maps they want to fit their style. But again, it's a kind of very niche negative, so to speak, for those of which are looking for a very specific audience for their tournaments. But with kind of moving forward in terms of how the competitive open map pool is then implemented, have you been in contact with any of these organisers, or are we going to be seeing any tournaments straight away in Q4 implementing this idea? If we get any info on that, perhaps?
At the moment, Asteris Cup has announced that the ETech Mania will use one map from this map pool.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, nothing has been announced yet. I'm also part of Trackmania Esports collaboration, so it's basically a group on Discord where most organizers and other influencers of the game are there. The discussion is still open, so as soon as something gets announced, it will be announced.
Mm-hmm.
It will be
Yeah,
public.
for sure. Because I mean, it is something. I mean, I understand with even what we've seen within recent issues with PTC and ALM kind of clashing, is these sort of things normally only start getting the wheels in motion just a short bit of time before the tournament actually starts. But hopefully we can see a trend with, of course, ETech. Of course, credit to Astray for bringing a hopefully great tournament, another hopefully great tournament, a new addition to the calendar this year that we've not seen not seen before. So we'll definitely get that to look forward to as a kind of cutting of the ribbon, so to speak, for the competitive open map pool. But in terms of, as I said, its implementation going forward, of course, it is eventually down to the tournament organisers. I mean, of course, the competitive open map pool isn't there to be forced on anyone. Of course, we're not there to then say you have to use this, you have to do that, because of course a lot of these organisers do kind of hold their kind of competitive identity dearly. But the main goal of things like this and the information it's been putting out is to show how great of an idea this is, and the most important part now is getting the opportunity to show that, getting the opportunity to show to all these tournament organisers how much easier this makes their life. As of course we've seen tournaments in times gone past where things have either moved slowly or it's resulted in the, you know, for example, admins of the tournament getting stressed out, as in, have we got enough testers at this time? Have we got enough maps coming in? I mean, even in, for example, one of the tournaments that was announced recently, I think it was some sort of solo tournament. It didn't get a lot of exposure, and it eventually got shut down because they hadn't even received enough maps. And even something as simple as that, even something as simple as, you know, a weekend tournament or something like that, you know, that the competitive open map pool could have been the saving grace for a tournament like that, which hopefully this is a kind of buffer zone for those type of tournaments, which don't then which then run into these issues. Say exactly with the issue Erwin was talking about there in terms of full speed, they don't have the right contacts to get map testers for both inexperienced and experienced players. So I suppose that this. So was the goal with competitive map pool more to make this easier for everyone, or was it more addressed to any specific? Because you said, of course, the community is quite diverse, and within this diverse community, we have not really a split almost, but we have a lot of kind of teams who take these tournaments very seriously, organisers that host very serious tournaments. Is this specifically aimed towards any sort of groups of those, or is this intended to be, as at least it looks, a kind of open tool almost to anyone who's willing to use it?
Well, it is an open tool, but I think it's mostly directed towards those competitions that are highly competitive, so to say. So when it comes to the styles that that are being played, tech and dirt, it's already becoming less used in competitions. If you can take a look at the recent months, so to say, Air France is mixed.
Yeah.
Not speaking of Zerator and so on. Yeah, I think it's directed mostly at high level competitions, but again, it's open for everyone. So
yeah, because I can see that was also one of the main points of which was put up in the WordPress article about progressive difficulty, as well as the point we were going through previously, as in we can have tournaments of which even have, you know, say for example, say we just played TCS there, which was division based. We could have even used progressive difficulty through that in terms of the divisions, the lower divisions.
That's how it's going to be also in ESAC for each rank. So
so would you mind giving us a bit more information on how that's going to kind of be split up?
When you start up with the bronze rank, you only have access to the shorter maps, and as you rank higher, you also unlock the extended versions, meaning you once you have a higher rank, you have multiple possibilities in queuing, in selecting the maps for queuing. For example, if you're gold, you can actually select all the versions. You can select the short one, the medium one, and the hard one. If you're silver, you can select the medium one and the short one. And if you're bronze, you can only have access to the shorter ones. So it actually pushes player to go to rank up, to unlock multiple maps, because obviously, not obviously, but the ranking algorithm takes account the length of the map. So if you play longer maps, you can gain more rating.
And the decision made for that, was that as what specifically made you want to then split up the map pools per the gold, silver, and bronze ranks in terms of that? Was it in terms of giving the players a kind of reward almost for ascending through the ranks, or in terms of making it a bit more accessible? So, for example, your more inexperienced players aren't jumping in at some, you know, extremely tough level maps for them against players who might know a bit more of the techniques. What was it that specifically made you do that decision?
Both the accessibility and the reward you get from ranking up. That's pretty much it.
Now, in terms of how this will work, actually going into the kind of matchmaking or the tournament, well, of course, the matchmaking in terms of the gold, silver, and bronze in that, is there any plans to expand upon that? As I understand, of course, going into the kind of down period, so to speak, which was the 6 months kind of off off time. There was plans to make expansions on the matchmaking ladders, and there was, of course, talk of kind of currencies of which could be redeemed through the ESAC. Is that something that's planned going forward?
I'm sorry, can you ask again?
Sure. So we're at the end, as kind of the matchmaking service was evolving. Previous, of course, say last year when it was all being implemented and things were speeding up, more players were participating. We saw the introduction of events like, say, your Friday night events, your Saturday night events, which were then introducing they were introducing rewards to the matchmaking service. Is that something you're planning to implement again, going into kind of matchmaking V2, so to speak, or is that something that's going to take a bit more time to get implemented, do you think?
So those type of events will no longer be available on ESAC. At the moment, I want to keep the matchmaking queue as one single queue, because there was a problem when we had those events that there were multiple queues and people were queuing for multiple reasons, for either for training some competitions, either for playing classic maps, either for playing those type of events. And now everything will be centralized into a single queue where the players have the possibility to pick which maps they want to play. In terms of events, not matchmaking events, maybe knockout. I have actually already started in making a plugin that would work with ESAC and a knockout type of format.
Right, yeah.
Tournaments, there will be, I think, not sure if daily, but weekly tournaments, more than sure. Maybe not when the ESAC, maybe when the site will come back, but later on this year. Also, I've seen quite a nice idea. The PVM, maybe you've heard of PVM.
All right.
It's I've seen it on Cinemix's channel. They basically have a Google Sheet where they have multiple maps, and you have multiple medals. Not multiple medals. 2 times, an author time and an alien time, so to say.
Yeah.
And based on what times you can reach, you will get a rank. And maybe that's something actually I might consider in adding to ESAC, basically kind of a daily challenge to a map to pass a certain time, and if you do pass the time, you gain, I don't know, maybe coins or rating points and stuff like that. There are I have multiple ideas. Right now the priority was to restructure the backend, the servers, so when the site comes up there won't be anything special or anything new, even less features than it was before, but the matchmaking will be a bit different. I actually will show the website a bit later. And yeah, just better security, better interface, UI and stuff like that. Later on, as we progress, more features will be added and more events and stuff like that.
Well, I guess it's most important to have the fundamentals kind of nailed down into a T, and then of course we can start getting the bells and whistles, as I say, of course. But to introduce one of the ideas actually given by Bits in the chat, so he was kind of presenting an idea in terms of how the kind of map packs will come about for the different versions of. If you get a lot of maps, either have 2 separate map packs or have a list of backup maps. That if the organizer doesn't like, you could use one from a growing reserve list, so to speak. And of course, this way you could have a third category of mixed maps, for example. But of course, as he kind of introduced one of the positives there of having a growing list of maps of which you'll have available to you, of which I suppose can be switched in and out if needed. I mean, what do you kind of think about that idea of not only having an actual quarterly map pack, but say, for example, maps that maybe haven't hit the cut? What is it you would intend to do for maps like that? Would you kind of re-roll them into the Q1 enrollment for the maps? Do you have any ideas for them? What do you think in regards to that?
I haven't actually think about it. When it comes to this, I think there's a lot more thought process to for this, so I don't know if I can give you an answer right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the main thing about these sort of ideas, of course, thank you to Bits for suggesting it, is feedback, of course, and feedback on the ideas and the points of which have been brought in the competitive open map pool. And of course, we are reachable through ESACGG on Twitter and Facebook, and of course by means of Discord as well. The Discord links are down in the bottom of the stream and will be posted if required. So, of course, contact us for any ideas of which you have, any ways of which, any holes of which you've seen in this, or any opportunities of which you've seen in this, as to how the competitive open map pool can then be made bigger and better. As we said, this is an open tool. It's in the name. It's a competitive open map pack. It's to make this the scene a lot more easier for organisers, and as well a lot more easier for players, just in the sense of having less maps to train, things they can focus on. You know, there's a bit less confusion as to how these sort of things work. It's here to make everyone's life easier. So definitely get involved. Yeah, mappers as well. Exactly. Can't forget one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. I mean, they're almost in the name, of course. But with the you were saying in terms of the website and the functionality will kind of be reduced in terms of that. Is that just kind of trimming off the bells and whistles, as we were saying, while they get the fundamentals nailed? Is that something of which we can expect then more functionality to be added going forward, or is it just is it just intended to get it off going and then add things as, you know, everything's settled?
That was the main reason I actually refactored the whole code and the whole backend and servers for ESAC, so that I can add multiple formats, multiple types of events and tournaments. Basically be as diverse as, not as diverse as possible, but making more formats and styles available when it comes to gameplay. Right now, yes, I've focused on the fundamentals. When the fundamentals are done and the matchmaking works, it's gonna be up, and they're up on ESAC.gg, and as soon as it's ready, it's gonna be live. So I'm not gonna wait to add every feature and then publish it. You will have the core stuff. You will see less content than it was last time when you entered the platform, but yeah.
Do you have any planned timescale for that at all?
No, I can't say. I'm not gonna say a date because it's very unpredictable at this moment.
Of course, yeah. Just not putting any additional pressure on yourself, of course. But now that you're kind of looking to the competitive open map pool then being introduced, I mean, in terms of how the tournaments are then getting organised going forward, how quickly do you see something like this being picked up? Do you think we're going to see tournaments, say for example, in the tail end of 2018, picking this up? Or do you think it's going to need to be like, say for example, a tournament organizer is going to need to see, you know, a few tournaments have implemented this and then it's went well, instead of just kind of dipping their toes in themselves? How long do you think this kind of idea will take to fully get rolling, do you think?
I'm not sure if I can anticipate this, so we will have to see. I mean, right now, Scottie was kind of open to the idea so far, and we will see. We'll have to wait and see. Might not even work for this quarter, but maybe for the next quarter. I don't think it's going to work on a short scale. It has to keep on going and until people actually are aware of it more and more, and maybe it's gonna get picked up more and more. Hopefully the players are gonna realize the potential it has and speak up and suggest other organizers to adopt this, because it's also in their interest.
Yeah, exactly as you said there. It's in everyone's interest. It's not just, as I said earlier, this isn't a tool that's implemented just for tournament organisers. This is implemented for, as we said, mappers. This is implemented for players themselves, just to make everything that little bit easier for everyone to then get involved in terms of this, for players to make it easier for them to play multiple tournaments at the same time, for example. I mean, just say, for example, back in the day when we had STC and NC on at the same time, I mean, you could only imagine that if they were on differing map packs, then they would not have had the kind of level of commitment to each individual tournament if the players were having to train 6 different maps instead of 3, for example. As of course they combined the map packs of which they had. I suppose that's kind of a little indication of the general idea of which this has then been looking for this. I suppose in terms of how I would perceive this getting picked up, I expect the first or maybe even the second quarter being a little bit of a showcase, like, hey, look we can do. Look at how much easier this is for these different people involved. You know, why don't you give it a shot, kind of thing. See how much easier this makes it for yourself. And that's how I at least believe this thing's going to get spread. It's not going to be that an idea is going to be put out there and everyone's going to be kind of, you know, chomping at the bit, so to speak, to go for it. Is something I've kind of observed from the Trackmania scene, is a lot of the decisions that are made are almost based upon tradition or what we are used to doing. So as this is a kind of new functionality that people haven't really had access to before, it might take them a little bit of time to kind of, you know, shake the shackles of what they're used to doing. For example, I mean, used to doing their own map requests, they've got their own teams that they've got sorted for these sort of things, to make sure, of course, that this opportunity is available to them, and at least for them to give such an excellent tool a chance of then being a chance of showing them what it can do for them. Is, of course, in terms of the actual idea itself, it can only go to make things easier for you. A lot, if you almost look at it, it's almost like outsourcing one of the jobs for the tournament, as in there's things you can tick off the box when you're thinking, when I need to organize a tournament, I do not need to do this anymore. I do not need to map request. I don't need to map test. I don't need to find testers. You don't need to do that anymore. In terms of this, kind of almost handles that, so to speak. This is a platform of which everyone will have access to. But as we said, I believe in terms of the players will be the biggest benefactors from this, because this will open up so many opportunities for other tournaments. And what I then mean by that, say for example, you wanted to have segmented tournaments. So you wanted to have a tournament who would then have, say, what was the tournament called? It was KOTT. No, not KOTT. The Musketeers Cup that the E-Corp guys done. They had a very private tournament almost. It was only with a specific amount of teams. As in, say, this competitive open map pool was introduced, we could have a kind of closed, kind of almost premium or kind of champion tournament, so to speak, where maybe a lot more of the support would go towards. And we also have other tournaments which can go along at the same time, which everyone has access to, your less experienced players, so they can look at tournaments like MTT or whatever it was called. Pardon me to all of those organising, I have forgot the exact abbreviation to it, but
remember it as well.
Yeah, so at least we're both on the same bandwagon with that. But with that, at least you can have a tournament running alongside that at almost no extra stress to yourself, to show then to have players from much smaller teams, a much less experienced team, MML, thank you, NMD. You can have teams that will then be able to participate in a tournament on these maps, even perhaps in the same format, to see how they would stack up against them. Or even if you wanted to establish a season format for something like that, you can establish a feeder series going into the MML to even give a bit more consequence to both tournaments. So even in the terms of tournaments that already exists, it opens up so many more kind of brackets of opportunities into that. As I said, to even establish some sort of difference between that, say you wanted the MML Champions bracket to be on harder maps or longer maps, and you wanted the feeder series to be on shorter maps but easier maps, then there you go. Competitive open map pool solves quite a good bit of your problems right there and then. with a structure that's already in place, of course. But I guess the most important thing about this at the moment is the fundamental ideas are in place, the wheels are in motion, the map submissions have been open since the 1st of August. They're open until the 31st of August. For those who are interested in getting involved in other capacities as well, the map testing and selection process will be for the full month of September, from the 1st until the 30th of September. And then Q4 is intended to go live from the 1st of October until the 31st of December. And then it will be roughly the same kind of process, of which will go forward into our different quarters, as in a month of map submissions being open, a month of map testing and selection processes being open, and then the map pool being live for the first of the next month. So in the case of Q1,
months.
Yeah, for 3 months. So the first of the month of, say, January 20 until the 31st of March 20. Of course, that's how this is going to work going forward. Now, just as a terms of a bit more of a menial question in regards to this, so was the decision to make it quarterly in order to keep the kind of map pool fresh going forward? Was that your kind of idea into making it a kind of quarterly pack, instead of just, say, for example, if I kind of rework the idea that Bits had, have one kind of map pool and just a massive reserve list that you just kind of switch them out in? What was the ideas behind kind of making it a quarterly selection between them?
I'll actually even consider on rotating it on 2 months, from 2 months. But it might have been the case where it was pretty difficult to estimate how many maps should the pool have. I mean, right now a problem in the scene can be with the fact that players consistently have maps to train, new maps to train. The rotation is pretty often in the competitions that are active in these days. So having kind of a longer time span for the map pool would actually even make players excited for having new maps. Also, it could be easier for newer players to have time to learn the maps. It basically, those are the main reasons. But again, feedback is open. Everything can change if the community wants. This is not really. This is just a sketch of mine. Everything, all the requirements, and this is just the main sketch for it. Everything can change if people want it. So feel free to leave feedback, or everywhere on Discord, on Twitter, wherever you want.
Mm-hmm. As we said, of course, getting in contact with us is as easy as, at least on the stream, you can see if you scroll down, the Discord, Twitter and Facebook links are then given there. For any feedback is of course going to be much appreciated, because of much of this has been Erwin's own work. Of course, even for the most experienced and most the person with the biggest knowledge base in Trackmania isn't going to be able to do everything, of course, by themselves. So any sort of feedback so that there's anything that perhaps hasn't been picked up, any ideas of which can be more well-rounded, any suggestions, or even people who want to get involved through the map selection processes, through even if they want to get involved in the mapping processes, the map requirements are all available. That's not a problem at all. So it's going to be clear in regards to exactly what would be expected from the maps, just in case, of course, so you don't need to keep rewinding through the blog of which we've got. The vlog, sorry, that we've got put in place here. But as well, as I said, the key word is making this as easy as possible. And now it's about about getting everything rolling. We've got, as I said, that the wheels set in motion, and anyone that wants to get involved, of course, primarily, of course, I guess, map testers, map makers to get involved, so that we can get as well-rounded a map pack as possible, and as well so that we can have as well varied testers of these maps as possible, because again, this is an open map pool for not only more experienced, more skilled players like, say, myself, for players who are a bit more inexperienced, who are maybe not entirely sure how to approach all of these turns. It's important to have an input from people like this as well, because you're the people that are going to be playing these maps. It's not just me. It's not just people in in the top teams of which do exist there. It's teams going to be coming from each corner of Trackmania. It's going to be dirt players. It's going to be tech players. So community involvement is important here. This is a framework of which has been set in place, and certainly, at least with the community's involvement, I only see it going up from here. But in terms of the actual competitive map pool, I believe I've kind of ran through as much of the kind of fundamentals of that as we can. Now, were you saying previously that you had a little idea of how we're going to be seeing the ESAC page going to be looking going forward? Or is that something we'll have to save for a later time?
No, I can actually show the website at the moment. I have the website up.
Well, there we go. For any of those who want a sneak peek in some little bit of a flashback there to cast your mind back 6 months.
So there's a bit of a refresh when it comes to the UI. The match page is a bit different. The statistics are already on the main page. Before, it wasn't actually a different home page. Right now, not right now, but when it's gonna be live, users can actually access the website without having to be logged in. So you could see, for example, the leaderboard without having to make a new account, and you will see the rating and stuff like that. That's pretty much the same, just a bit more fresh, so to say, when it comes to the UI. A bit less features, just the fundamental features. And the new thing is going to be here on the matchmaking page. So before, you had different queues for different map pools, and right now there's only one queue with different map pools. So you have the possibility to actually pick maps from multiple map pools, whichever you like. You could, for example, just play Hokolicious if you want to play Hokolicious, and you're going to have a player found to you for by the queue system if another one also wants to play Hokolicious, or you could just play all of them. You have these possibilities now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The ranks are the same. All the data will be kept from the open beta, from what it was previously when it was up. Yeah.
Well, it looks good. As we can see, there are a lot of recognisable features for those who haven't seen it in quite a bit of a different time. But also something that was highlighted there through a little showcase there was the addition of an actual Nadeo map pool. What was your kind of idea in getting the Nadeo maps involved?
Again, for actually being more accessible to new players. That's the main idea.
Yeah. As well, something with the Nadeo map pool getting involved, it's like when you say, for a player like myself, I'll be training competitive maps, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on and so forth. It's nice to have the option as well. Say I'm using the queue for training. I'm 1v1ing against people, try to get some consistent rounds in. It's nice to have the option available not only just for new players but for old players, so they can go back. Do you know what? I'm going to have a bit of fun in one of the Nadeo maps, for example. And also, of course, that will be good for any other environments of which do get involved in that, to give yourself as many options as possible, while still remaining something of which will be able to be fundamentally used across the board from any player of which can, of course, access it. But I mean, in terms of the website, of course, we can see everything looks good there. As we said, the fundamentals are in place. Like I said previously, all that kind of remains is to see how to of course get the community involved, get our tournament organisers hopefully picking up this idea, get our mappers involved, submitting some quality maps for us to test, but also a question of which was then brought in there by our dear Astri, who's of course, shout out to him for picking up the idea of the competitive map pool for his upcoming tournament, which I'd certainly advise yourselves to check out going forward. But going into the actual map request, Astery was then asking in regards to that, how do you see 3 different maps out of 1 being made? As I believe the interpretation of the map submission is 3 different length versions, being from the V1, the V2, and the V3 being different lengths. Now, I believe Astery means in terms of this as in the same map being different lengths. Is that what you intended through that, or is it, as at least I understood it, as in it's essentially going to be almost separate map requests almost, but for the different lengths of which were mentioned? Would you be able to clarify a little bit more than that?
So whenever you submit a map for this map pool, you have to provide 3 versions for each map, so it can get picked. The 3 different maps are basically the same map but 3 different versions. They all have the same start. That's a requirement. All 3 versions start from the same point, the same start block. And throughout the versions, the finish is placed further. That's, I think, pretty doable. That's how it should look like.
Yeah. So basically, I suppose it's very interesting in terms of a challenge for mappers going forward. Is this, at least I would find an interesting challenge in terms of making a map which, first of all, would be shorter and easier, but also in a way of which you leave it open to it being more difficult. Like, for example, if there's any Trials fans out there, back in the old days, there was the Groundhog map, of which it would have its first version, which would be relatively easy, nice and easy jumps, the same kind of obstacles, and it would be nice and easy for the first one. The second one would follow the exact same path. However, say for example, where you just had, a kind of hill of which you would go over, the next one, that's a jump, and which you have to, of course, have enough speed to make. The obstacles get slightly more difficult, and of course, say in this case, the track gets longer. And for the third one, the obstacles, say the jumps are longer that you have to make, the obstacles are slightly more difficult. And it does create a challenge to the mapper to be able to create a similar map, as in terms of which you would then be able to recognize, as in you're driving this map and saying, oh, this is like version 1, however it's longer and it feels more difficult. So is that a challenge that you would say as a mapper? I would personally say that would be a challenge that would excite me more than anything else. I believe you would agree with that, at least.
I haven't even mapped. I'm not sure. I think it was doable I imagine it. I imagine it could be doable. So yeah, it still can be a challenge because, like you said, you have to kind of let room for the map to grow harder and harder. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll certainly be looking forward to it as well. I suppose our combined mapping experience will not be nearly enough to lend us a very experienced input in this. I think I've made one map which consisted of a massive ramp with boosters and a few blimps, which I think was about as far as I got. But I mean, we all got to start somewhere, I suppose. But I mean, in terms of how the community can then get involved in this, is it just contacting the Discord through Twitter and Facebook in terms of that, just in terms of communication, or how do you want people to get in contact with you if they want to actually get involved, say through the map testing and selection and things like this?
I think the easiest way would be on Discord. You just join the Discord and either contact me from there. You'll see me on top on the section with the users on the server. Or there's also a channel, Comp Q4 2019, and you can type your feedback there, suggestions, anything you wish to say.
Now, just to answer Astrid's question, and of course I'll read it out for those who are then looking back on this, is, for example, taking 2 competitions, so TMM and TMWC, which would both be interested in an open map pool, but of course TMM more suited to short maps, and again that's more the tradition. Well, TMWC is difficult, longer maps. How is the difficulty managed for such maps, and are you allowed to just adjust a few blocks from an easier version, i.e. changing a pole to changing a hole? Now, the important thing with this is I believe I might be able to answer this a bit more. Of course, correct me in any points of which I do hilariously mess up, Erwin. But with it being the different versions of the same map, ideally we don't want to then be seeing just simply it's the same way and then more obstacles get added in the way. That's not entirely what we want to see. Of course, the idea of the map is the same, as we said, the same start. And we want to see for the harder maps that it gets progressively difficult. That does give you room to make things more difficult, even in simple ways, just by, say, having an additional obstacle in place. But as I said, we don't want it that it's just essentially a map with a little bit added on at the end and a bunch of poles in the way. Of course, unless it's perfectly executed, it's just going to look a little bit more tacky. Use, different turns, different blocks, different angles, elevation here and there. Don't be afraid to experiment for the different versions of which you do then submit. We're not looking for carbon copies of the same map, which we've just tacked an extra 10 seconds onto and, added a few poles here and there. That's not what's wanted here, and that's not what looked for, if I'm correct, and of course speaking on behalf of the competitive map pool in that. But of course, I understand that was just an example in terms of that, but I'm just illustrating in a sense that these maps don't have to be carbon copies. Of course, they by different versions of the map, we're talking about maps that are similar, but they're of course not the same. It's not just simply that they're longer or shorter.
For Q4, they have to be from the start until the first finish point. From the first version should be found exactly the same in both the other versions, V2 and V3. And the only thing, it should be extended from the finish. This is for Q4. We'll see how the feedback will be, if the maps will look okay with this requirement. If not, we can change. But for now, if you would put the maps on a sheet of paper, the V1 should be found on all three of versions, exactly the same. So the first 40 seconds should be the same in all three versions, and the same for the third version. The third version should be basically exactly the same as the second version, but longer.
Right. So fair enough. That's most likely my own misinterpretation on that. I've not been doing my homework as much as I should have. But of course, again, unfortunately, I'm not a mapper, so that's kind of good. It's not in my hands then. But with that, of course, as we were saying previously, all of the information regarding the map requirements, the specific information of which will then be needed, will be in the WordPress documents, and of course will be available as linked in the Discord and things like that as well. So
also on Mania Exchange, the requirements are there.
Oh, yeah, through the new map pack feature, is it?
Yep.
Or
yes, I will link it.
Fantastic. So yeah, of course, the map pack feature from Mania Exchange, of course, shout out to them to developing that themselves recently. We'll get that underway, and of course all the information you need for it will be there. And again, for any questions you guys need to ask, the contact details are here and present in terms of this. But moving forward for the competitive map pool, as I said, we'll look to see what tournament organisers bring it up, and as I said, look to see who will be getting involved and who will be helping getting this project underway. But in terms of this, of course, you do see our social links down below. We have been doing the third edition here of the esports, a little podcast here. We'll keep it going. Of course, it is an idea of which we did have previously, getting something underway, the Electronic Sports Arenas Challenger podcast, of course, with our previous ones of which we done before the 6 months break. We'll intend to be bringing more subjects to yourself. Of course, any suggestions you guys would like to have, any things of which you would believe you want to know more about, you want to see discussed, you want to even get involved in discussions on, again, get in contact with us. You will see our details there on the stream right in front of you as to how you can contact us. Of course, feel free at any point to get involved in the future podcasts through suggestions or even direct involvement, and we will be happy to see how we can bring some more content to you going forward, not just through ideas like the competitive open map pool, but of course, structured discussions regarding events or developments that are happening going forward. I mean, that's at least I would then be happy to do as your host of the ESAC podcast. And of course, I understand having to kind of coax you out of the production room, Erwin. I'll try and do that once and again for our future podcasts, if you'll allow me to. But in terms of this going forward, at least that's everything at least I can bring to yourselves in terms of discussions regarding this. Was there any more points you felt that you wanted to bring to light regarding our open map pool?
No, I think we covered pretty much every detail.
No problem. Well, again, guys, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're all satisfied with how we've answered your questions today and presented the competitive open map pool for you. I can only hope to see all of you get involved with this idea and as well with any of our future podcasts of which we do get involved in. But I have been Scottie. It's been a pleasure having you along with us. And of course, thank you very much for Erwin again for producing this podcast. I've been able to just sit here, wave my hands about, flap my gums every now and then. And of course, thank you very much to him for organising these sort of ideas and producing the podcasts. But that's it from me. I will let our esteemed guest and producer and founder of the ESAC sign us out and say goodbye.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Scottie, for hosting it. Feel free to follow Scotsman on Twitch. He's going to play a lot today.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so see you.
See ya.
Have a great evening.